Hello everyone, it's me Buckeye Politics. Welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be looking at the 2022 Oregon governor election. Interesting race that really shouldn't be an interesting race. Oregon, for those of you who do not know, is traditionally a very Democratic leaning state, mostly due to the Portland urban areas and the suburbs around it. Very progressive, very liberal area in that part of the country. That kind of carries the rest of the state to the Democratic Party. Joe Biden won the state and by a landslide. I believe it was 15 to 16 points back in 2020. And back in 2018, actually, the current Democratic governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, she won by not the biggest margin, actually. She only won by about 7 percentage points. She was carried over by her strong support in the Portland area. You can see with this one county that's 70 to 80% Democratic. While the suburbs, she she didn't do very well in, and the rural area, she didn't do very well in either. Now, Kate Brown is term limited, and she is not super popular, which a lot of people said may open the way for a Republican to swoop in since it is an open seat, and it's going to be a red wave year. And the current governor is not very popular. That said, I personally didn't look too much into this race. I figured it would be a little closer than expected, but I still thought Tina Kotek, the Democratic nominee, would hang on relatively handily. That said, we have something interesting, completely changed the entire view of this race from my point of view, and that is Betsy Johnson. Now, Betsy Johnson, I've talked about her before. She is a state senator who is currently running as an independent. Now, Betsy Johnson as an independent is a good thing for the Republicans because Betsy Johnson is a relatively progressive independent. She's running kind of like as a further left alternative to Tina Kotek, who's already pretty far left, but not as much as Betsy Johnson. Now, Betsy Johnson's interesting though because on some positions she's actually semi like right wing, like she's trying to appeal to like blue collar voters for like economics and like unions and stuff like that, and some issues such as like abortion. She's not well, abortion she's pretty far left on, but she's very weird politically, but she's mostly going to appeal to progressives and further left types like in Portland, which as we saw back in 2018, Democrats need to do well in that area to win because otherwise the rest of the state will easily outvote them. And so if Betsy Johnson were to split that vote, like people have said she may, that may open the way for Christine Drazan, the Republican nominee, to swoop in and narrowly win. And we've actually already seen this in polls thus far. If we go down here to the only poll conducted so far, and that was by Nelson Research back in May, who has Christine Drazan getting 30% of the vote to Tina Kotek's 28%, with Betsy Johnson at 19%. You can almost guarantee that that maybe like 15 out of that 19% would probably go to Tina Kotek, even though this isn't a Republican internal. So a lot of people have said, oh, it's a Republican internal. It's going to favor the Republicans, obviously. So I thought it'd be interesting if we looked at this poll, looked deeper into it to really see, does it favor the Republicans, or is it actually a pretty accurate pollster despite that apparent R lean? So let's look at Nelson Research's poll. Obviously here they tell you how it was conducted. So they have about 516 likely voters, margin of error about 4.3%. That's pretty much an average poll. So we go down here. They obviously say like hello. They did most of this via phone, I believe. Yeah, and then so they come down here and they ask you, generally speaking, in the November election, are you more likely to vote for a Democrat candidate or a Republican candidate? So the Democrats, strongly Democrat is at 31%, while strongly Republican is at 35%. This adds up. Republicans are energized more than Democrats are because they're not big fans of Biden. Obviously, Biden's done a pretty bad job, and even a lot of Democrats agree with that. So it makes sense that people would be like more energized to vote Republican. Meanwhile, looking at somewhat Democrat is obviously higher than somewhat Republican because there's a lot of Democrats in the state of Oregon who just don't like Biden but may vote Democrat. So when you add that kind of together, the Republicans have about a 1 point lead, about 40 to 39, which is pretty accurate for an early poll. That makes sense honestly to me. And a 1 point lead for Republicans and a Republican internal isn't really that good even. So I'm not sure why people are saying, oh, it's a Republican internal. It's going to favor the GOP. But no, we have a 1 point lead. That's really not that good for an internal in terms of energy. Now we look further down, they're a little different, but like right here, if the election for governor of Oregon were held today, would you vote for Tina Kotek, the Democratic candidate, Christine Drazan, the Republican candidate, or Betsy Johnson, the Independent candidate? And they would obviously shift the names around, so people would, if so Tina Kotek, who's the Democrat, has 27% of the vote. Christine Drazan has about 29%. Betsy Johnson has 19%. And not sure/refused, I obviously got 23%. That's the majority. Now, this makes sense. A lot of people probably aren't even sure who these people are. It's June. Not many people are really thinking about, unless you're really into politics, not many people are thinking about the midterms in June. So it makes sense not sure/refused would be that high. So really, I'm not all that too concerned with this. This poll honestly seems pretty accurate to me thus far. Go down here. This is what I want to look at. So the demographics. So that was obviously the results. Let's look at the people they actually surveyed and see how they compare to the Oregon electorate. So the gender they interviewed, 51.6% of people interviewed were female, 48.4% were male. Let's look at the 2020 election in Oregon. Let's go down to these the exit polls, which obviously people would tell who they voted for. Let's go. Let's see. Where is the male or female? We missed it right at the top. My bad. So male and female voters are pretty much identical in the state of Oregon for turnout. Males made up 50% of voters. Females made up 50%. Very little difference in between them. Obviously, females, according to this, broke for Joe Biden 63 to 35%, which that should tell you all you need to know. Meanwhile, Trump got about 45% of the male vote, while Biden got about 51% of the male vote. So obviously here, females vote overwhelmingly more for Biden in Oregon than Republicans, and yet more females were surveyed than males. So already this should tell you that this poll, it says a Republican internal, but based on the people they polled, I don't know. It looks like they oversampled females. Republicans still have a lead. So just saying that there. Let's go look at age. Let's go. How old are you here? Age 18 to 34. Obviously, in this election, 17% of voters were 18 to 29. 11% were surveyed, so that's pretty accurate considering it ends at 29 to 35. So pretty accurate here. Not a huge sample of the electorate. 30 to 44 made up 24% of the electorate, and they voted for Biden by 62 to 34. That means around here, that's about 40% of voters. So about 40% of people surveyed were in a demographic that voted for Biden by 62 to 34. 45 to 64 voted for Biden 52 to 58. So that would be around here, and that's about 48%. And then 65 year old only made up about 24%, and they voted for Biden 54 to 44, and that is obviously the majority of the poll. So according to this, the majority of people surveyed were 60 and over, which originally you may think, well, that favors Republicans. Older people tend to vote more Republican. But not according to this in Oregon. In Oregon, it's more like middle-aged people tend to vote more Republican. I'm sure some of that spills over the 64%, but 45 to 65-ish is pretty much the Republicans' most solid voting bloc in Oregon. And they were actually in the minority. The plurality was 60 and over, which, I'm sure is some of that. So really, this poll here, once again, really doesn't show that big of a lead for the Democrats. Or Republicans, I should say. It's pretty much a dead heat. Let's looking at education, because I think this was an interesting one. So let's see. College graduate voters make up 30% of voters, and they voted for Biden 72 to 25. Non-college degree voted for Biden 51 to 46. But there's 70% of voters in Oregon. So interesting to look at. Let's go down to the high school and education, where it's down here. Here we go. No, that's race and education level. Let's see. Did we pass it up at the top, actually? We may have. Let's see. How old are you? Level of education. Do they not? They might not have. CNN exit polls have, old are you? Are you female college graduate? Really? So they don't have education on the New York Times. Okay. That's interesting, actually. Did not expect that. Okay. Going up and down the New York Times, trying to find. Actually, let's go to where in the state you live. Actually, that's to be interesting. So, geographic area in terms of where they recorded people from, because this is actually a very important demographic to look at. So, looking at this, the Tri-County area made up that was the majority of where people were recorded from. That's the Portland area, which we said earlier. Democrats need to win in order to do well. Portland suburbs, that's pretty much that. Voted about 63 to 35 for Biden. 37% of those surveyed were from the Portland Tri-County area, and they voted. In 2020, they voted 63-35 for Biden. Yet in this poll, Christine Drazan's winning. So that says that the vote is probably being split. It would make sense that Biden voters and progressives in Portland, even though they're the most surveyed, will probably break more for Betsy Johnson because she is a more progressive candidate. Looking at the East-South, only East and South make up pretty much even. It's actually pretty accurate. They made up about 25% of the electorate. 2020, they oversampled them a little bit here, but that's within the margin of error, so not too concerned there. And they made up about 25%. They broke for Trump 57-39. That's the more rural areas I was talking about. The Republicans do well in. So they actually pretty much the sample was pretty much even. So you may say, well, they just oversampled rural areas, more Republican areas. No, they didn't. It was within the margin of error by a point or two. That's not going to make a huge difference. The coast, only 6% were from the coast. That's here, so I'm not going to talk about that. The mid-Willamette area, 26% of voters were from there. That's a pretty competitive area. It's a very swingy area compared to the rest of the state. Biden did win the area, 51-45, but that's still relatively competitive for a more suburban area. And it made up 29% of the electorate. They only surveyed 26%. So as you can see here, the majority of this area surveyed. The majority of the people polled were from the Tri-County Portland area, a pretty big majority, actually. And that area voted for Biden 63-35. The rest of the areas that are more competitive or more Republican-leaning were pretty much even sampled. So this poll is pretty accurate, pretty damn accurate compared to the 2020 results. Like this is, I don't know why this is a Republican internal exactly. I'm assuming Nelson might have worked with the Drazen campaign. That's the only thing I can think of. But really, based on what I'm seeing, based on the actual poll itself, not just the results and the R next to the name, but actually looking at the geographic area, the education, the race, the age, this poll is pretty accurate to the 2020 election, which Biden won by 16 points. So this definitely shows that there is something there. Last thing I want to look at is the political party. And so obviously in this poll, 40% of people surveyed said that they were Democrats. 33% said they were Republicans. Now this might be why it might be considered an R-leaning poll, because it's only a 7% compared to the 2020, who I think Biden said he won by, like, yeah, up here. People consider themselves only 24% to 36%. So this might be why it's a Republican turn. Like, they oversampled Republicans, but they also oversampled Democrats. So they actually just completely obliterated independents. They basically just surveyed all mostly Republicans, mostly Democrats, and then the independents got, like, cut down. Only about half the people in this poll compared to the other ones that were independent. But independents voted for Biden. So, and obviously Democrats are probably going to be a little turned off by Biden. And actually, a decent amount of Republicans voted for Biden too. So really, this year, well, yes, they'd oversampled Republicans. They also oversampled Democrats, and they undersampled independents. So really, if Betsy Johnson's running as an independent, it makes sense that she could actually do better if more independents are surveyed. And if this is the national environment, or Democrat plus 7 in Oregon, if a vote is split, that's a win for Christine Drazen. So looking at this, looking at these polls and all this stuff going on, I think that this race is actually going to be very competitive. I think Christine Drazen has a solid chance of victory. I think the Democrats are splitting their vote, and Betsy Johnson's going to cost the Democrats the governorship. Honestly, looking at this, I mean, obviously this is only one poll so far. We got to wait for more to come out. I'm not saying this for sure, but based on this one poll, yeah, it says it's a Republican internal, but it is pretty damn accurate when compared to 2020, except for like one or two air things, which when you count in margin of error is like a 2-3 point difference. So the poll is, yeah, let's go back to this. So the poll said margin of error about 4 to 5, 7. That's pretty much that's like a +2 favorable area for the Republicans. This is really not that. This is a solid poll, going to be honest. So with that, thank you for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe for more, because this is going to be a very interesting road to the midterms. I'm going to be covering all of it.